Hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on this classic wooden Monk motor cruiser here in Victoria, British Columbia, along with the loving memory of my pup Geordie, all the while fixing it up for some pretty major cruising someday. If that's the sort of thing you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. Just such a lovely sunny but cool day. I think I'm gonna work outside on the hull, start to get some of the cosmetics done on the actual top sides, and in anticipation of getting some paint on it so she looks a little better. Anyway, let's jump right into it. Well, good morning. So there's a little punky spot here on the port side and the aft end, and this will need a new plank eventually, most definitely, but I can't do it this time. So what I do, I make a note of it, I measure the plank, and I make sure I have wood for next haul out or subsequent haul out. So I need to do an interim repair here, which will basically be some fill. Actually, it's actually not that bad. It's a localized area, and if I can get it dry enough with some heat, I can get some epoxy and some filler to stick on that, and it'll be relatively okay for a bit. So first I'm going to just clean it up with a wire wheel on my grinder. But to make sure I don't do any damage to the adjacent plank, what I'm going to do is just slide in this little piece of aluminum here and into the seam, and that guarantees the wire wheel won't touch the next plank. Using a wire wheel like that is about the most dangerous thing you can do without eye protection, because it's always throwing off wires, and God, if that impaled you in the eyeball, it just impaled me in the chest and it hurt. Okay, so now some heat. Ouch! Can you see that? Let's just pull that back out of me. Alright, I'm really pleased we finally get some cool weather, and the 2 or 3 really hot days when I had the burlap on here has really kept this from drying out too much. These gaps could have been huge. So I'm actually very pleased. That's a fantastic technique. You're all covered with dust. Sorry. Is that better? Okay, more reefing. As I've always said, I don't like epoxy, but I appreciate epoxy. Okay, let's get some of this on to wet it down. So I'm just going to put in a little barrier that I made out of cardboard and some sheathing tape, and that will keep... fortunately I made 2 because it looks like I'm going to need 2. There we go, and that'll keep any epoxy out of the seam, and it'll actually act as a form because here it's actually going to be down into the seam. Okay, so now I'll just put some unthickened epoxy in and get that soaking in. This is red cedar, and the reason it's in trouble is because it's the first red cedar strake or plank, as the boat is yellow cedar below the waterline and red cedar above the waterline, and you can see why yellow cedar is better, at least underwater. Alright, I'll get that good and saturated, and then we can add some filler to this epoxy. And ladies and gentlemen, for today's project we're going to be using West System 403 with microfibers. I don't know why microfibers sounded good. I know next to nothing about the West System line of fillers. I'm going to use this one today. It's quite fluffy. Oh my god, I have a feeling this is going to be blown in the wind quite... not so bad. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you watch me mix this. Okay then, let's see how this works out. I know. Sorry, gotta move you a little too close. That looks pretty fair to me. That'll have to do. So now you're very familiar with this particular butt block and this connection. This is the one that gave me the trouble when I was afloat. I had the patch on it, yada yada. It's an interesting butt block because it's a transition from regular planking to the beginning of the chine log. In other words, the beginning of the hard chine basically starts at this butt block. And so this particular plank has a lot of curve in it, thus the split. And this is going to have to be pulled back in a good 3/16 of an inch, maybe almost a quarter, 3/16 I'm going to call it. So I'm probably going to steam that in place in a bag, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So let's have a look at the other side, the starboard side version of the same joint. I'm just starting to take it apart, and I've pulled out the bungs that were easy. I see some refastening here already, and you can see why at the top, to keep that top pulled in. And I'm going to need heat to get this putty out of here. Yeah, same crack, same cup, but it's okay. Let's see if I can dig these out with a little heat. Well, there wasn't much on there. There's a screw right there. And it's a Robertson by the look of it. Yeah, so that's fairly recent. And worse yet, it looks like it might be stainless. Anyway, we'll find out soon enough. That's just a mess of old stuff. Anyway, nothing in there. All right, well, that wasn't much fun. One newish screw, whole bunch of old ones, and some empty holes. Yeah, pretty typical. Stainless. Evil, evil, evil. Okay, we gotta check in on Lloyd's boat here for a little bit. What do you think, Lloyd? Big changes here.
Big changes.
Big hole. There's a hole in your boat. Scott, what are you up to?
Pulling planks.
Pulling planks. Wow. This is pretty serious stuff. You all know Scott, master shipwright. He knows what he's doing. I wouldn't do this. Cool. And you're doing this because?
So we got no plank bevel left. There's a good 1/8 of an inch gap on both sides of the plank.
Right.
And then there's this mess of through holes.
Right. A big bunch of holes here.
And it's super checky. You can see that the check's going right almost through. On the other side, the check's going straight through the plank.
Exactly.
So there's this sort of compounding, like, let's renew it.
Right.
Let's give it a new plank.
Just easier to do it all in one.
So we'll be putting in red cedar.
I understand. I saw the wood. Beautiful piece of wood you brought.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. And so you're taking it out in little sections to avoid any bash and smash stress on the frames.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Exactly.
still going to be stress on the frames, but I'm
A lot
fairly
less.
confident
Yeah.
that they're intact enough to survive this.
Right. What sort of fasteners are you finding?
A lot.
A lot of different ones. Any nails?
Some nails,
Yeah.
some screws, some Phillips head screws, flathead screws.
Right.
It's definitely a collection of
stuff.
like check out up here.
All kinds of
there's
stuff.
Just,
Yeah.
it's gonna be 20 fasteners at the end of that hood
I
end.
know, exactly. I love the nice deep rabbit. Lots of room to put its fasteners in.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Well, I'll come and check in on you a little later.
Okay, right on.
This is going to be a fun thing to follow because this is real boat stuff, not just painting. How do you feel about it?
I feel good.
Good.
You guys did a great job.
I know. Okay, we'll get back to work. See ya. See ya. Okay, so if we look at the same spot on MV Geordie right here at the stem, you can see it's never been refastened. There are some original, what appear to be nails actually, and there don't appear to be any screws in here at all. Well, maybe one. But mostly it's the original nails into the hood end, and you can see how deep that nail is because you saw how deep the rabbet was. Rabbet is the notch cut in the stem, basically for the planks to sit into. So there's lots of meat in there to screw to. So I'm not going to take anything out here, well of course, not even this one. I'm just going to put some extra screws in around as insurance that those hood ends never spring. Now you might say, okay, you're starting the Swiss cheese process. Well, to a certain degree, that's true. I'd like to only reuse existing fastener holes, but when it's this sound, I don't think that's worth doing. Okay, bleeders, a pretty common problem, at least with boats that are in their first phase of restoration. After a while, perhaps they're completely under control. These bleeders, and what they are fasteners, especially in iron fastened boats, that are rusting, and the rust bleeds through and you get rust on the side of the boat. What causes them to rust? I don't know. I would imagine initially, perhaps when the nails were driven, you know, they rubbed a little zinc off the end and they were vulnerable. Maybe not. Maybe it's electrolysis is eating through the zinc. For whatever reason, they always seem to happen near the bow. Probably because there's higher humidity inside at this point. But again, I'm no expert. It just seems to be where most of them seem to hang out. Okay, so there's a bunch of different approaches to dealing with them. I'll show you the way I deal with them. First, we got to get the bung out. Now, I'm not sure that this bung is even a bung. It may be putty. There we go. So, I've exposed a little rusty little mess in there. How are we going to clean that up and keep it from rusting again? I used to use an assortment of Dremel bits, little wire brushes you can put in the end of a Dremel, but they're not really aggressive enough. They wear out quickly and they're expensive. Did a little research, and the hot tip seems to be to chuck up a piece of wire rope and simply use that as a wire brush. Now, I happen to have a little bit of wire rope here left over from the steering, and the only way I can cleverly think of chucking it up, because I'm not going to be able to cut it without it making an absolute mess, is to chuck it up in advance and then cut it off. So let's try that. Goggles. Okay, now we have quite a nice little wire brush. Of course, we have to run in reverse, otherwise it'll unravel. Might even run forward a little bit. Anyway, let's play with it. Okay, let's just try it in reverse before we splay it in any way. Oh yeah, jumps around, gets in there, but it maybe needs a little splaying. I'm gonna run it forward just a little bit. There we go. Now we'll see how it works. Note to self, I might make it a little shorter next time, a little less flexible, but this is working great. Actually, running it in forward is quite aggressive. Okay, now we got to get something on there to keep it from rusting again. There's all kinds of rust converters or this and that and the other thing. I'm perfectly content just to put CPES, clear penetrating epoxy sealant, on that, where I've done that in the past on MV Zephyrus and other places on this boat, which was more successful. It's worked fine, and we've got 2 or 3 years, no trouble. So that's what I'm going to do. But first, I'm going to dig out all the rest of them, and we'll catch up again a little later. Sorry about the bouncing. All right then, so I've gone around all the bleeders on the boat, and they've been dug out and cleaned out with the wire brush. Now I'm going to saturate them with clear penetrating epoxy sealant, CPES. It's kind of a go-to for wooden boat people. It's basically a very, very thin epoxy, and it will soak in and coat all of that and hopefully resist future rust. But what I do is I create a little dam around each one with a piece of tape, and I leave it kind of just sitting there for now, because I'm going to come along with a syringe and I'll just scooch it in there and seal it up, and at least it'll keep it from just pouring out right away, and it'll get all up in where it needs to get. It seems to work relatively well. So let's just get some more tape on the rest of these. All right, here we go. I'm gonna mix up some CPS. This particular version is Smith's CPS. I understand there are different manufacturers making roughly the same thing. It's mixed equal parts, so I'm just gonna eye it. I'm gonna say I want about that much, well, twice that. The trick is to put the right cap back on the right can. You'll notice I'm wearing gloves. That's because I find this stuff particularly onerous on the skin. Okay, so I've got that much, so that much again, a little less because of the taper is up to the bottom of my thumb. I'm gonna say right about there. Okay, and we'll stir that up. All right, here we go. So I'm going to inject this with a syringe. So that's super simple. We fill the syringe and we go for a walk. Now let's just do these 3 right here
although I'm going to be doing quite a few more. So I simply lower the tape a little bit, start to fill up the joint a bit, get it up in the top, and close the tape.
Good.
Done. Trying to get it in the top as well. There we go. And try and make sure it doesn't run down my arm, because I do not like this stuff on my skin, as I said. All right. Now the seam between planks and a wooden boat is actually a tapered seam. In fact, it should only be tapered for about half of the plank, and then it should be tight seamed at the back. But as boats get older, that gets opener and opener. That's not a word. More open and more open. Anyway, the actual caulking, the term caulking applies to this cotton, which is hammered into the back of the seam, and when it gets wet, it will expand and tighten up and create the waterproof joint that a boat seam is. The stuff on top, in this case I was using 291, but it could be linseed based product, paying, some kind of seam compound, is really only there to fair the seam and protect the cotton over its lifespan. So now that I've removed the paying, I got to remove the cotton, and it's really kind of handy to wait a day or so after. I'm shaking the camera while I do this, because the cotton will dry out a little bit and it'll be a lot easier to pull this out. Anyway, I think you get the gist. I'll find an easy bit to do somewhere. Anyway. And it's the day 6 wrap up. Kind of cosmetic and or sort of vanity work today, but I'm glad to get it done because I do want to get the boat tidied up a bit and get some paint on as much of it as possible to try and reduce its drying out. It's starting to cool a little more now, and it's not so hot, and in fact we have some rain coming, which is good. So it's a little less pressing, but gotta keep it from drying out too much. See you tomorrow. And good morning. Nice, cool, breezy day, perfect day to finish reefing out all the cotton now that the paying is out over the top of the seams. I'm waiting for all the CPS to dry up. It's actually very, very slow to cure this stuff, so it'll be another day or so before I can actually put filler in those bungs. Anyway, or in those holes. I'm actually really, really pleased. There's a ton of work to do, but it's going well. Reefing the cotton out of the seam is actually remarkably satisfying. It goes, well, when it goes well. I believe if you look at this cotton, you'll see it has been bunched up, which is sort of the classic way. When you lay the cotton in, you do it in little bunches. Anyway, we'll show you that when we get to that. So it seems like it was nicely done. And in fact, this cotton doesn't seem all that old, so it was probably reef-cocked not that long ago. Well, you know, in decades.